The night I found the spreadsheet, I was wearing his favorite dress. The emerald one that made my eyes look like sea glass, the one he bought me in Milan on our honeymoon. I remember standing in his home office, my bare feet cold against the marble floor, watching my entire marriage reduce itself to cells and columns on a glowing screen. My name was in cell A1. Next to it, a dollar amount. Below that, a timeline. And at the very bottom, highlighted in yellow like some grotesque achievement, were 3 words that made my knees buckle. Phase 3 complete. I was Phase 3. My husband of 4 years, the man who kissed my forehead every morning before coffee, the man who cried at our wedding vows, the man I thought I knew better than I knew myself, had reduced me to a line item in his financial projections. But here's what he didn't calculate. Here's what his fancy formulas and carefully constructed timelines never accounted for. I would find that spreadsheet. I would understand exactly what he'd done, and I would burn his entire empire to the ground. My name is Seraphine Valdez Ashford, and if you're watching this right now, wherever you are in this world, I need you to stay with me. I need you to hear what happens when a woman discovers she was never loved. She was leveraged. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the most dangerous thing a man can underestimate. A woman with nothing left to lose. Tell me where you're watching from right now. Drop your location in the comments, because I want to know who's riding with me through this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the real beginning, but the moment I thought my life was starting. The moment I first saw him. It was a charity gala in November, the kind where old money pretends to care about new causes while wearing watches worth more than small houses. I wasn't supposed to be there. My best friend Marlo had dragged me along because her date canceled and she refused to face her mother's society friends alone. Just 1 hour, she'd promised, pushing a glass of champagne into my hand. Smile pretty, dodge the questions about when you're getting married, and we'll escape to that taco truck on 5th Avenue. I was 27 years old, working as a restoration specialist at the Hartwell Museum, earning enough to afford a tiny apartment in Brooklyn with a radiator that clanged like it was possessed. My father had died 3 years earlier, leaving me with a modest inheritance that I'd tucked away for emergencies. My mother had passed when I was a child. Ovarian cancer. Fast and cruel. I was alone in the world, except for Marlo and my work. I was standing by the window, watching snow fall over the city, when I felt someone beside me. You look like you're planning an escape route. I turned, and there he was, Dorian Ashford. I didn't know his name then, didn't know that he'd spent 3 months researching me before this accidental meeting. I just saw tall and handsome, dark hair swept back, eyes the color of aged whiskey, and a smile that felt like it was designed specifically for me. Is it that obvious? I asked. Only to someone who's done the same mental calculation. He extended his hand. Dorian, and you must be the most interesting person in this room, because you're the only one not trying to network. I laughed. It felt foreign in that space. Seraphine, and I'm just here as moral support for my friend. The best kind of person to bring anywhere, he said. Loyal, observant, probably secretly judging everyone's fashion choices. The woman in the purple feathers definitely made a choice, I admitted. He laughed then, a real laugh, and something in my chest cracked open. That's how it begins, isn't it? A laugh, a look, a feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. We talked for 3 hours. He asked me about my work, not the polite, glazed-over questions people usually asked, but real questions. He wanted to know how I matched paint pigments to original 18th century techniques. He wanted to understand the patience required to repair a canvas that had survived centuries. He looked at me like I was the painting, like I was something worth restoring. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him. When he called the next day, I answered. When he asked me to dinner, I said yes. What I didn't know was that Dorian Ashford never made a move without calculating the return on investment. What I didn't know was that my father's death had activated a trust I knew nothing about. A trust connected to shares in a family company my grandmother had co-founded before I was born. Shares that had been frozen in legal disputes for decades. Shares that were about to become worth $47 million. Dorian knew. He'd known for months. He'd hired investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants. He'd mapped out my entire family tree. He knew about my mother's medical history, my father's debts, my grandmother's business dealings. And he knew that if he married me, if he gained access to my financial life, if he positioned himself correctly, he could control everything. But that night, standing by the window with snowflakes catching the light behind him, all I saw was a man who made me feel less alone. All I saw was possibility. Our courtship was a masterpiece. I see that now. He was an artist, and I was his canvas. He learned everything about me and reflected it back with such precision that I felt understood in a way I never had before. He remembered that I took my coffee with exactly half a spoon of sugar. He showed up at the museum with lunch on days I'd mentioned being too busy to eat. He listened when I talked about my parents, about the grief that still caught me off guard, about the fear that I would always be fundamentally alone. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered one night, holding me in his penthouse apartment. "I found you, Seraphine, and I'm not letting go." 6 months after we met, he proposed. He did it at the museum, after hours, in front of a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi, a woman artist who had overcome unimaginable trauma to create works of power and beauty. He said he chose that spot because I reminded him of her. Strong, resilient, extraordinary. I cried. Of course I cried. I said yes before he'd even finished the question. Marlo was worried. She'd grown up around men like Dorian, understood the particular charm of the privileged in ways I didn't. "It's just fast," she said carefully, watching me try on wedding dresses. "That's all I'm saying. 8 months from meeting to marriage is—" "Perfect," I interrupted. "It's perfect, Marlo. When you know, you know." She hugged me then. And if her arms held a little too tight, if her eyes looked a little too sad, I convinced myself it was just her protective nature. She wanted me to be happy. And I was happy. Wasn't I? The wedding was intimate. His choice. He said he wanted our vows to be sacred, not a spectacle. His family was small, an elderly mother in a care facility, a brother who sent regrets from abroad. My side consisted of Marlo and 3 colleagues from the museum. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt focused. Just us, beginning our forever. The first year of marriage was everything I'd dreamed. We traveled. We laughed. He supported my career, even helped fund a new restoration wing at the museum. He was generous with his time, his attention, his resources. When he asked me to consolidate our finances, I agreed. When he suggested I add him to my accounts for emergencies, I didn't hesitate. When he offered to handle the boring legal stuff around my inheritance, I signed every paper he put in front of me. I trusted him. I trusted him with everything. I trusted him with me. And that trust was the most expensive mistake of my life. Our second anniversary, I had started noticing the small things. Not red flags, more like pink ones. Faded warnings I should have examined more closely. Dorian took phone calls in other rooms. He had meetings that ran late, dinners with investors that stretched past midnight. He became distracted during conversations, his eyes drifting to his phone even while I was mid-sentence. Work stress, he explained. The Ashford Fund is going through a transition. Once we close this deal, things will calm down. I believed him. I was good at believing him. But there were other things. The way he questioned my spending, even small purchases. The subtle comments about my salary being supplemental. The slow, steady isolation from the few friends I had. "Marlo is so negative," he'd say after she visited. "Don't you feel drained after seeing her?" "She's been my best friend since college," I'd remind him. I know. I just want to protect your energy. You're so sensitive, Seraphine. So easily affected by other people's moods." He said it with such tenderness that I almost missed the accusation embedded within it. Almost. The museum started feeling like a sanctuary. It was the one place where I was still fully myself. Seraphine Valdez, restoration expert, scholar, professional. There, I wasn't Mrs. Ashford. I wasn't someone's wife. I was competent and confident and clear. One of my colleagues, a conservator named Gideon Okonkwo, noticed the change in me before I did. "You're different lately," he observed one afternoon. We were both working on a damaged Baroque painting, brushes moving in careful, practiced strokes. "Quieter." "Am I?" "You used to hum while you worked. These old jazz standards." "I never told you, but I looked forward to it." I set down my brush. I didn't realize I'd stopped. Gideon was careful with his words, the same way he was careful with his work. "Is everything okay at home?" "Of course," I said automatically. "Dorian is wonderful. We're very happy." The words tasted strange in my mouth, like I was reading from a script someone else had written. That night, I came home to an empty apartment. Dorian had left a note saying he was traveling for business. "Miami," he said. "Back in 3 days." There was no kiss goodbye, no call to explain. Just a post-it note on the marble counter. I wandered through our penthouse, this beautiful prison I hadn't recognized as such. 12,000 square feet of carefully curated luxury. Everything in it had been chosen by Dorian. The art on the walls, modern, cold, valuable. The furniture, designer, uncomfortable, photogenic. Even the books on the shelves were arranged by color rather than subject. Where was I in this space? Where was the Seraphine who collected second-hand novels and hung postcards from flea markets? Where was the woman who used to cook pasta at midnight and dance alone in her kitchen to old Motown records? I couldn't find her anywhere. The third year brought the worst of the changes. Dorian became controlling in ways I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding paranoid. He installed a new security system that tracked when I came and went. He insisted on handling all our mail. He grew irritated when I worked late, accusatory when I mentioned any male colleague. "I saw how Gideon looked at you at the gala," he said one night. "Don't think I'm blind." "He's my colleague, Dorian. A friend. Men aren't friends with women like you. They're just waiting." I should have pushed back. I should have recognized the jealousy for what it was. Control disguised as love. But I was so deep in the fog by then that I couldn't see the edges. The worst part was how he could switch. One moment, cold and critical. The next, loving and gentle. He'd bring me flowers after an argument. He'd plan romantic weekends after a week of silence. He kept me off balance, never knowing which version of him I'd come home to. I want to pause here for a moment to ask you something important. Have you ever stayed in something, a relationship, a job, a friendship, longer than you should have, because leaving felt more terrifying than staying? Have you ever made yourself small to keep the peace, quiet to avoid conflict, invisible to stay safe? If you have, I need you to tell me in the comments. Not to share your whole story, that's yours to protect, but just to say, I stayed too long too. Let me know I'm not alone in this, and maybe in doing so, we can remind each other that surviving something doesn't make us weak. It makes us human. The night of my 31st birthday, everything began to unravel. Dorian had planned a party. Intimate, he said, just close friends and family. I didn't know who those people would be. I'd lost touch with most of my friends by then, and Dorian's mother had passed the year before. But when I came home from work, the penthouse was transformed. Caterers, flowers, a jazz quartet in the corner, and people, so many people. Dorian's business associates mostly, men in expensive suits, women with careful smiles. "Surprise," Dorian said, kissing my cheek. "You didn't think I'd let your birthday pass without a celebration?" I plastered on a smile and played the role of grateful wife. I circulated through the party, making small talk, accepting congratulations on our marriage, on Dorian's latest business success. At some point, I found myself in conversation with a woman named Celeste Vance. She was older, elegant, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see more than most. "You're the restoration specialist," she said. "Dorian speaks of you often." "He does?" "Oh yes, he's quite proud of his acquisition." She sipped her champagne, eyes never leaving mine. "His what?" Celeste's smile flickered. "Forgive me, that was a poor choice of words. I meant, he's proud of his wife. You must be quite the asset to him." Asset. Acquisition. The words stuck in my brain like splinters. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the caterers had packed up, I found Dorian in his office. He was on the phone, his back to the door. "The timeline is on track," he was saying. "Another 18 months and she'll be completely positioned. The trust funds are almost consolidated." I froze in the doorway. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She trusts me completely. That's the whole point." He laughed. "I know. Best investment I ever made." My blood turned to ice. He was talking about me. He had to be talking about me. I backed away silently, retreating to our bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. Every kindness, every gesture, every whispered promise. Best investment I ever made. When Dorian slid into bed beside me, I pretended to be asleep. When he pressed a kiss to my shoulder and murmured, "Happy birthday, my love," I willed myself not to flinch. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, planning. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I called Marlo. "I think I'm in trouble," I whispered into the phone. "I don't know who my husband really is." Marlo didn't ask questions. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply gave me an address and said, "Meet me in 2 hours. Don't tell Dorian where you're going." The address led to a coffee shop in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat, it looked like the kind of place where secrets were safe. She was already waiting when I arrived, 2 cups of untouched coffee on the table between us. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her about the phone call, about Celeste's strange words, about the small humiliations and large silences of my marriage. I told her about the isolation, the control, the constant feeling that I was playing a role in someone else's play. When I finished, Marlo was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and opened an app I didn't recognize. "I've been waiting for this conversation," she admitted. "I didn't want to say anything without proof. I didn't want to be the jealous friend who couldn't stand to see you happy." "What do you mean?" "I hired someone. A few months after your wedding. A private investigator." "I know that sounds—" "You investigated my husband?" "I investigated a man who appeared out of nowhere, swept you off your feet, and married you in 8 months." Marlo met my eyes. "I love you, Seraphine. I wasn't going to just watch and hope for the best." She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a document, a report with Dorian's photograph at the top. "His real name isn't Dorian Ashford," Marlo said quietly. "It's Daniel Ashcroft. He changed it legally about 10 years ago, around the same time he was investigated for fraud in London. The charges were dropped, but he left the country shortly after." My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the document. Page after page of information I'd never known. Previous marriages, 2 of them, both to women with substantial family assets. Lawsuits, allegations of financial manipulation. "He targets women," Marlo continued. "Women with inherited wealth, especially those who aren't fully aware of what they have. He researches them for months before making contact. He becomes exactly what they need, and then he slowly gains control of their assets." "But I don't have—" I stopped. The inheritance. The trust I'd always considered modest and unremarkable. "My grandmother's shares are worth $47 million now. The company went public 3 years ago. That's right around when Daniel, started researching you." The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. Everything I thought I knew about my life was collapsing. "He married me for money," I said flatly. "Our entire relationship was fake." "The relationship was fake," Marlo agreed. "But your experience was real. Your love was real. Don't let him take that from you, too." That night, I did something I'd never done before in my marriage. I snooped. Dorian was at another one of his dinners, and I had the penthouse to myself. I went to his office, a room he'd always claimed was filled with boring financial documents I wouldn't be interested in. His computer was password protected. I tried everything I could think of: his birthday, our anniversary, his mother's name. Nothing worked. Then, on impulse, I tried Seraphine 1. The screen unlocked. The first thing I found was a folder labeled SV Project. My initials. Inside were hundreds of documents, financial projections, legal analyses of my inheritance, a detailed timeline that mapped out our entire relationship, from first meeting to marriage to final consolidation. And then I found the spreadsheet. My name in cell A1. A dollar amount, $47 million, in cell B1. Below that, a list of milestones. First meeting, November 12th. Proposal, July 18th. Marriage, October 3rd. Full financial access, achieved. Trust consolidation, in progress. At the very bottom, Phase 3 complete. Final phase timeline, 18 months. I didn't know what Phase 4 was, but I knew it couldn't be good for me. I photographed everything. Every document, every spreadsheet, every damning piece of evidence. Then I closed the computer, put everything back exactly as I'd found it, and walked out of that office. I called Marlo from the bathroom, the shower running to mask my voice. "I found it," I said. "I found proof of everything." "Good. Now we need to get you out of there safely." No. The words surprised me as much as it surprised her. No, I'm not running. He took 4 years of my life. He made me doubt my own mind. He isolated me from everyone I love. Seraphine, I'm going to destroy him, Marlo. Legally, financially, completely. I want him to feel exactly what he made me feel. Small, powerless, alone. There was a pause. Then Marlo laughed softly. There's the Seraphine I remember. Welcome back. The next few weeks were an exercise in deception. For the first time in my marriage, I was the one playing a role, and Dorian was the one being played. I smiled at him over breakfast. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings. I pretended not to notice his late-night phone calls, his mysterious meetings, his growing confidence that his plan was working perfectly. Meanwhile, I was gathering allies. I contacted his previous wives, 2 women named Penelope and Ingrid, both of whom had been left financially devastated after their marriages to Daniel Ashcroft. They were initially reluctant to speak with me, but when I explained what I'd discovered, they opened up. He takes everything, Penelope told me over a secured video call. Not just money. He takes your confidence, your identity, your ability to trust yourself. I spent 5 years in therapy after our divorce. How did you get out? I asked. I didn't. He left me once I had nothing else to give. That's his pattern. He doesn't end relationships. He depletes them. Ingrid's story was similar, but darker. He tried to have me committed, she revealed. When I started asking questions about our finances, he convinced everyone I was paranoid, delusional. I almost believed it myself. Their experiences hardened my resolve. This man had destroyed lives without consequence. He'd weaponized love, manipulated trust, treated human beings as nothing more than capital to be acquired and liquidated. I was going to be his last victim and his final mistake. I hired an attorney named Theodora Fitch, a woman with a reputation for dismantling powerful men who believed themselves untouchable. She was small in stature but massive in presence, with silver braids and a gaze that could cut through concrete. I've heard of Daniel Ashcroft, she said during our first meeting. Whispers in certain circles, but no one's ever been able to make charges stick. He's very good at what he does. So am I replied, and I have evidence. I showed her everything, the spreadsheet, the documents, the testimonies from Penelope and Ingrid, the financial records that showed how systematically he'd transferred assets into accounts I couldn't access. Theodora studied the materials for a long time. Then she looked up at me with something like respect. You've done remarkable work, Mrs. Ashford, but I have to warn you, building a criminal case will take time, years potentially, and he has resources, connections. He'll fight back. I have time, I said, and I have something he doesn't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. Theodora smiled. Then let's discuss strategy. The plan was multi-pronged. First, we would document everything through proper legal channels, affidavits from his previous wives, financial forensics, a paper trail of his deceptions. Second, we would quietly freeze what assets we could, preventing him from transferring more of my inheritance. Third, we would wait for him to make a mistake. That mistake came sooner than expected. It was a Thursday evening, 3 months into my secret campaign against my husband, when Dorian came home with news. I've been offered an incredible opportunity, he announced, pouring himself a whiskey. A partnership with the Covington Fund. It would require some Restructuring of our finances. What kind of restructuring? Nothing major, just consolidating some accounts, liquidating some assets. I'll need your signature on a few documents. He said it so casually, as if he weren't asking me to sign away the last of my grandmother's legacy. Of course, I heard myself say. Whatever you need. His eyes lit up. He kissed me then, deep and passionate. And I felt absolutely nothing except the cold satisfaction of a trap being set. I'll have the papers ready tomorrow, he promised. This is going to change everything, Seraphine. Trust me. That night, I called Theodora. He's moving faster than expected, I told her. He wants me to sign something tomorrow. Some kind of liquidation. Perfect, she said. We're ready. Here's what you're going to do. The next day, Dorian presented me with a stack of documents in his office. He'd set up the scene carefully. Champagne, flowers, soft music. This is a new chapter for us, he said, handing me a pen. Our future starts here. I looked at the documents. Pages of legal jargon that I now understood better than he knew. Asset transfers, account consolidations, power of attorney forms that would give him complete control over my inheritance. Before I sign, I said slowly, can I ask you something? Anything, my love. What's phase 4? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dorian's smile didn't falter, but something behind his eyes shifted. I don't know what you mean. Phase 4. It's in your spreadsheet. The one on your computer. The one with my name in cell A1 and $47 million in cell B1. Silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, Dorian's mask began to slip. You went through my files. I did. That was private. So was my inheritance. So was my trust. So was my love, Dorian. Or should I call you Daniel? His face went white. For the first time in our marriage, I saw my husband without his carefully constructed facade. Underneath was something cold and calculating, a predator stripped of its camouflage. You don't understand what you've done, he said quietly. I understand perfectly. I understand that our entire marriage was a con. I understand that you researched me for months before we accidentally met at that gala. I understand that every tender moment, every whispered promise, every tear at our wedding was manufactured. I stood up, the unsigned documents falling to the floor. But here's what you don't understand, Daniel. You're not the only one who can play a long game. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Dorian's eyes darted toward it. That would be Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Division, I said. And I believe you've already met my attorney, Theodora Fitch. They have some questions about your previous marriages. And your current one. You can't do this. His voice cracked. Everything I did. There are explanations. Save them for your lawyer. You'll need one. The next few hours were chaos. Police, lawyers, federal agents who had apparently been building a parallel case against Daniel Ashcroft for years. My evidence was the final piece they needed. As they led Daniel, out in handcuffs, he turned back to me with pure hatred in his eyes. You think you've won? He spat. You think this is over? I will destroy you, Seraphine. I will make you regret. The only thing I regret, I interrupted, is not trusting myself sooner. The door closed behind him, and for the first time in 4 years, I could breathe. The aftermath of Daniel's arrest was a tidal wave I had to learn to surf. The media caught the story within days. Socialite con artist arrested after wife discovers scheme, ran the headlines. My face, a photo from our wedding no less, was plastered across newspapers and news sites. Some coverage was sympathetic. A woman who uncovered her husband's crimes. A victim who became a victor. But other outlets painted me as naive, foolish, a woman who should have known better than to fall for such an obvious predator. Those stories hurt more than I expected. They echoed the voice in my head, the one Daniel had cultivated for years. The voice that whispered I was stupid, gullible, too trusting, too much. But I had Marlowe. I had Theodora. I had Penelope and Ingrid, women who understood what it meant to survive someone like Daniel Ashcroft. And I had Gideon. He found me at the museum a week after the arrest, sitting in front of the Gentileschi painting where Daniel had proposed. I hadn't been able to work. I'd just been sitting. "I heard what happened," Gideon said, settling onto the bench beside me. "I'm sorry." "Are you? Everyone else seems to think I got what I deserved." "Everyone else is wrong." He was quiet for a moment. "You know what I see when I look at this painting?" "What?" "A woman who survived something terrible, and then created something beautiful out of that pain." I looked at the canvas. Judith, fierce and determined, taking back her power from those who had tried to destroy her. "I don't feel beautiful," I admitted. "I feel broken." "You're not broken." Gideon's voice was gentle but firm. "You're just in need of restoration. And that's something we know how to do." Despite everything, I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd managed in weeks. The trial lasted 8 months. Daniel had hired the best defense attorneys money could buy. Or rather, money he'd stolen from women like me could buy. They tried every tactic imaginable. Character assassination, procedural challenges, even an attempt to claim that I had entrapped him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies from Penelope, Ingrid, and 3 other women who came forward after the story broke. The financial records that showed a clear pattern of predatory behavior. The spreadsheet. That damning, dehumanizing spreadsheet that reduced human beings to assets in a portfolio. In the end, Daniel Ashcroft was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, 4 counts of money laundering, and numerous other charges. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. I watched his face as the word guilty was repeated over and over. I watched the arrogance drain from his expression, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. He looked at me as they led him away. This time, there was no hatred in his eyes, just a terrible, hollow emptiness. And I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, sad, relieved that it was over, but mourning something too. Not him, never him, but the version of me who had believed in him, the version of me who had trusted completely, loved unconditionally, given myself over to what I thought was a beautiful partnership. That woman was gone now. I wasn't sure who would take her place. The recovery wasn't linear. There were good days when I felt like myself again, strong, capable, ready to rebuild. There were bad days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the shame and the grief felt like anchors dragging me under. Therapy helped. Dr. Evangeline Reyes specialized in survivors of financial abuse, and she helped me understand that what Daniel had done had a name: coercive control. Love bombing followed by systematic isolation, gaslighting, financial manipulation. "You were targeted," she told me during one of our sessions, "not because you were weak or foolish, but because you were loving and trusting. He saw those qualities as vulnerabilities to exploit. That's not your fault." "Then why does it feel like my fault?" "Because he trained you to believe that. Undoing that training takes time." I started writing during my recovery, not for publication, just for myself. I wrote about what I'd experienced, what I'd learned, what I wished I'd known. I wrote letters to my younger self, the Seraphine who stood by that window at the gala, who fell for a smile and a shared moment. Dear Seraphine, I wrote, you're about to meet a man who will change your life. Not in the way you think. He will take and take and take until you feel empty. But here's what you need to know. The emptiness isn't permanent. You will fill yourself back up with truth, with justice, with love that doesn't come with conditions or calculations. You will survive him, and you will be stronger for it. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. 3 years after Daniel's conviction, I stood at the opening of the Valdez wing at the Hartwell Museum. It was named after my grandmother, Rosalinda Valdez, the woman whose business acumen and artistic passion had created the wealth Daniel tried to steal. The wing was dedicated to women artists throughout history, those who had been overlooked and underestimated, those who had created beauty despite, or perhaps because of, the obstacles in their path. The centerpiece of the collection was the Gentileschi painting. I had purchased it for the museum with part of my restored inheritance. It seemed fitting that Judith would watch over this space, a reminder that women have always found ways to reclaim their power. Marlowe was there, of course, with her wife and their newly adopted daughter. Theodora Fitch had come, along with several of the attorneys who had worked on the case. Penelope and Ingrid had flown in for the occasion. We had become close in the years since the trial, bound by our shared survival. And Gideon was there, standing by my side, his hand warm in mine. We had taken our time. After everything I'd been through, the idea of trusting someone again seemed impossible. But Gideon had been patient in a way that was different from Daniel's calculated attention. He gave me space when I needed it. He listened without trying to fix. He showed up, consistently and honestly, without any agenda beyond friendship. When that friendship deepened into something more, it had been my choice, my timing, my terms. How do you feel? He asked as the guests began to arrive. Terrified, I admitted, and proud, and grateful, and about 12 other things I can't name. That sounds about right. The evening was a blur of congratulations and conversations. I gave a speech about my grandmother, about the legacy of women artists, about the importance of supporting those who have been marginalized and underestimated. I didn't mention Daniel by name, but I did say this. This wing exists because of a woman who refused to be invisible. And it exists because another woman, myself, learned that the most valuable investment we can make is in our own truth. We are not assets to be managed. We are not projects to be completed. We are human beings, worthy of love that doesn't come with conditions, respect that doesn't come with manipulation, and futures that we get to design for ourselves. The applause was generous, but what meant more to me were the faces in the crowd, the women who were crying, who were nodding, who were looking at me with something like recognition. Survivors know each other. We carry an invisible thread that connects us across circumstances and experiences. We've walked through fire and emerged scarred but still standing. We've learned that the things that were meant to break us can become the foundations of something new. After the event, after the last guest had left and the museum had grown quiet, I walked through the new wing alone. I paused in front of each painting, each sculpture, each artifact. So much history, so many stories of struggle and triumph. At the Gentileschi, I stopped. Thank you, I whispered, to Artemisia, to my grandmother, to the version of myself who had found the courage to look at that spreadsheet, and decide that she was worth more than a dollar amount. I thought about the woman I was at 27, hopeful, lonely, desperate for connection. I thought about the woman I had been at 31, trapped, diminished, convinced that love meant submission. I thought about the woman I was now, at 35, scarred but sovereign, wiser but not hardened. Daniel had promised me forever. He had stood in this very museum and sworn that he would love me for the rest of his life. And in a twisted way, he had changed my life forever, just not in the way either of us expected. He had tried to reduce me to numbers on a spreadsheet. Instead, I had become a story, a warning and a promise, a testament to the truth that survival is not just possible, it's powerful. 2 weeks after the museum opening, I received a letter. It was from the prison where Daniel was serving his sentence. I almost threw it away unread, but something made me open it. The letter was short, only a few lines. I've had a lot of time to think in here. I know you won't believe me, and you have no reason to, but I'm sorry. Not for getting caught, I deserved that, but for the person I was to you. You weren't supposed to be different, but you were, and I ignored it because it was inconvenient. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you're the only one who ever made me wonder if I could have been someone else. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His apology was his to carry. It didn't change what he'd done, and it didn't change who I'd become. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. But I found that I could set down some of the weight I'd been carrying. Not forgiveness, that wasn't mine to give, and frankly, I wasn't interested in giving it. But something like completion. The acknowledgement that even he, in his own broken way, had recognized what I'd known all along. I was never just an investment. I was a woman who loved with her whole heart, trusted with her whole soul, and when that love and trust were betrayed, found the strength to reclaim herself. I was Seraphine Valdez, artist, survivor, victor, and my story was finally, truly my own. As I write these words, I think of you, whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, whatever battles you're fighting in silence. Maybe you're in a relationship that doesn't feel right. Maybe you're rebuilding after betrayal. Maybe you're just starting to realize that the life you're living isn't the life you want. I want you to know this. You are not an asset to be managed. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a phase in someone else's plan. You are whole. You are worthy. And no matter what anyone has made you believe, your story isn't over yet. The best chapters? Those are still yours to write. He promised forever. I was just his investment. But in the end, I was the one who gained everything, including myself. And that return? It was worth every penny of the pain.